Most men have no idea that attraction is not built in words. It is built in the nervous system. Before she consciously registers how she feels about you, her body has already decided. Her amygdala has already fired. Her brain has already begun cataloging your presence as either safe or irrelevant. And the tragic part is that most men are spending enormous energy doing all the things that happen after that window has already closed. The dinner, the texts, the compliments, the effort, all of it sincere, all of it too late. Today, I am going to walk you through 6 body language signals that communicate something directly to her nervous system, not her logic, not her checklist, and one of them, number 4 specifically, is so quietly powerful that licensed relationship therapists have used it as a reference point in session. Stay with me, because if you have ever walked away from a woman wondering what you missed, you probably missed this. Here is what nobody wants to say out loud. The reason most good men are still alone, and I mean genuinely good men, patient men, men who show up consistently, is not because they lack anything. It is because they have been operating from a script that was written for a different woman at a different stage of life in a different emotional era. That script says, be nice, be available, be consistent, show her you care through effort. And there is nothing wrong with any of those things, except that for a woman who has already been through enough, those signals register as familiar, not as safe, not as chosen, just familiar. She has had the man who took her to a beautiful dinner and still left her feeling invisible across the table. She has had the man who texted every single morning and still could not hold her attention for an evening. She has learned, through experience, to look somewhere else for the answer. She is reading your body. She is reading your presence. She is reading what you do when you are not performing. And that is exactly where this conversation begins. Dr. Albert Mehrabian at UCLA conducted landmark research on human communication that is still cited in behavioral psychology today. His findings established that approximately 93% of emotional meaning in a social interaction is conveyed through nonverbal channels, tone, movement, presence, while only 7% comes from the words themselves. Now, that ratio is debated in academic circles when taken out of context, but the underlying neurological mechanism is not debated at all. We process nonverbal social cues through the limbic system, which operates faster and deeper than conscious thought. She is not deciding how she feels about you. Her brain is deciding for her, and her brain is watching your body. I want you to picture a specific woman for a moment. She is in her early 40s. She built her career from almost nothing. She owns her home. She handles her own finances, her own decisions, her own emotional regulation, because for a long time, there was no one else reliable enough to share that weight with. She is not bitter. She is careful. She has had relationships that looked good on paper and felt hollow in the room. She has had men who pursued her with energy and then disappeared when it required depth. She does not need rescuing. She is not waiting to be swept off her feet. What she is quietly waiting for, even if she would never say it in those exact words, is to meet a man whose presence communicates, without a single sentence, that she is allowed to exhale. That is who we are talking about, and that is who all 6 of these signals are designed to reach. Before we go further, I need to tell you something. Some of what I am about to share will feel so simple that you will almost dismiss it. Do not. The simplicity is the whole point. Her nervous system does not respond to complexity. It responds to consistency, to steadiness, to the feeling that a man is in his body and not performing for her. Number 4 especially, I want you to be ready for it. Because when you understand what is happening neurologically in that moment, it will change the way you walk into a room. Do not skip ahead. Each point builds on the one before it. The first signal is what I call the weighted arrival. Most men enter a space as if they are trying not to take up too much of it. They move quickly, they check their phone, they scan for approval before they have even settled. And a woman who has been through enough reads that immediately, not as modesty, as anxiety. Her nervous system flags it as instability. What she craves, and I mean this in the deepest psychological sense, is a man who enters a room as if he belongs there, not aggressively, not loudly. But with what researchers in embodied cognition call postural confidence, shoulders relaxed and open, movement unhurried, weight distributed evenly rather than shifted nervously from foot to foot. The neurological mechanism here is mirror neuron activation. Her brain's mirror neuron system fires in response to your body language, which means your physical state directly regulates hers. When you move like you are settled, her nervous system begins to settle in response. For a mature woman who spends most of her day managing everyone else's emotional weather, encountering a man whose physical presence produces calm in her body is not just attractive, it is almost shockingly rare. A small warning here, this is not about performing stillness. Performed stillness reads as rigidity, which produces a different kind of alert in her amygdala. This is about genuine decompression, about actually arriving rather than simply showing up. And when you master that distinction, you will feel the shift in how she orients her body toward yours within the first 60 seconds. The second signal is the directional listen. Hear me out on this one, because it sounds deceptively ordinary until you understand what is happening beneath it. Most men listen with their face. They nod, they wait, they prepare their response. A woman who has been through enough has spent years sitting across from men who were physically present and emotionally elsewhere. She can feel it. The body always tells the truth. What shifts something fundamental in her is when a man listens with his entire orientation, when he turns his torso, not just his head, toward her, when his feet point at her rather than toward the door, when he is not checking his surroundings while she is speaking. This is not a trick. This is the body communicating attentional safety, and its neurological impact is measurable. Dr. Sue Johnson, founder of Emotionally Focused Therapy and researcher at the University of Ottawa, has built decades of clinical work around the concept of emotional responsiveness, the sense that another person is genuinely attuned into you. Her research demonstrates that perceived attunement activates the brain's attachment system in ways that profoundly influence emotional bonding. When a woman feels genuinely listened to at the level of your physical orientation, something in her attachment system registers this as extraordinary. For a mature woman who has carried the emotional labor of her relationships for years, who has explained herself repeatedly and still felt unheard, this signal does not just communicate interest, it communicates something she barely dares to want anymore, the feeling of being worth someone's full, unhurried attention. One nuance I want to offer, this only works when it is authentic. If you are leaning in while mentally composing your next sentence, she will sense the gap. Stay inside the moment. What comes next will show you why that same quality, real presence, not performed presence, is the thread that runs through every signal on this list. The third signal is the calibrated pause. This one is subtle, and it is one of my favorites because it uses silence as a form of communication in a way most men have never considered. When she finishes speaking, instead of responding immediately, you allow a beat, 2 seconds, maybe 3, before you answer. Not a checked-out pause, a present, warm, thoughtful pause that communicates that what she just said is worth considering before responding. Neurologically, what this does is activate the prefrontal cortex in a social exchange, signaling emotional regulation and psychological depth. She is not experiencing your silence as awkwardness. She is experiencing it as someone who is actually processing her. For a woman who has been through enough, who has been interrupted, talked over, and rushed through her own feelings, this pause lands like a revelation. It also does something more specific. It increases her oxytocin response. Oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, is released not just through touch, but through the subjective experience of feeling safe and understood. A man who pauses before he answers is a man who does not need to fill every space. And a woman who has spent years being exhausted by emotional noise will feel that quality in her body before she ever consciously names it. Use this carefully. Calibrated means intentional. A pause that becomes a habit and loses its presence becomes noise of a different kind. A woman once wrote something in a comment section that I have thought about many times since. She said, "I have been with loud men and quiet men, successful men and struggling men, but I have never been with a man who made me feel like my words had weight until I met someone who actually waited before he answered me." She said, "I cried in my car afterward because I did not realize how hungry I was for that." That comment was from a woman in her late 40s who had been divorced for 3 years and had almost stopped believing that kind of emotional safety was possible. I share that because I want you to understand these are not small signals. For the right woman, they are enormous. The fourth signal is the anchored gaze, and I told you this one was different. Here is what I need you to understand first. Most men use eye contact as a form of seeking. They look at a woman to see if she is approving of them. Their gaze drifts when conversation gets vulnerable. They look away during emotional pauses. They check her face for data about whether they are landing well. For a mature woman who has been through enough, that seeking quality in a man's eyes does not read as attraction. It reads as need. What she craves, and I mean this neurologically, not metaphorically, is a gaze that is offered, not extracted. The anchored gaze is eye contact that is warm, unhurried, and not contingent on her response. You hold it during a pause. You hold it when she looks away and looks back. You are not scanning her for approval. You are simply present in your eyes. Licensed relationship therapists in the United States have referenced this specific quality, steady, non-hungry eye contact, as a primary marker of what they call secure attachment signaling. It communicates, at a neurobiological level, that you are regulated, that you do not need her to manage your emotional state, that she is not responsible for your okayness in this interaction. For a woman who has spent years being the emotional anchor for everyone around her, encountering a man whose gaze does not place a demand on her is not just attractive, it is close to overwhelmingly rare. She will feel it before she understands it, and because of how the limbic system processes nonverbal safety cues, she will begin to orient towards you emotionally in ways she may not be able to explain even to herself. The fifth signal is the unhurried touch perimeter. This is not about physical contact. Let me be precise here, because this matters. The touch perimeter is the space just before touch, how close you stand, whether your body angle implies openness or distance, whether you reach towards something near her without invading. Most men either crowd or retreat. Both register as either aggression or disinterest in her nervous system. What communicates something entirely different is a man who maintains a respectful, relaxed proximity, close enough that she is aware of you in her physical space, far enough that she never feels managed. And here is the key. You let her close the remaining distance when she is ready. For a woman who has been through enough, autonomy over her own physical comfort is not a preference. It is a non-negotiable that lives below conscious awareness. When a man holds his proximity patiently without pressing forward, her nervous system interprets this as respect for her boundaries without being asked. That is a signal most women have encountered so rarely that it produces a kind of emotional recognition that feels almost like memory, something she thought she had imagined. The micro hook here is this. The men who understand what the sixth signal is doing will understand why patience in the touch perimeter is not restraint. It is strategy of the deepest and most human kind. As we come toward the final two signals, I want to slow down here for a moment because I think this is important. None of what you are learning today is a performance. It is not a set of behaviors you deploy on a woman like a sequence in a manual. What all of these signals share is a common root. They are all expressions of a man who is genuinely, unhurriedly, completely present. That is the thing she is reading, not the technique, the presence beneath the technique. She has spent too many years around men who were partially there, men who were there in the room but elsewhere in their attention, their ambition, their distraction, their protection of their own ego. When she meets a man who is simply fully there, who does not need to be somewhere else even for a moment, something in her that has been holding itself very tightly begins quietly to release. The sixth signal is what I call the returning attention, and this is the one I want you to carry with you long after this video ends. It is also the one supported by the most profound research on what creates lasting emotional bonding between adults. Here is the mechanism. In a 2010 study published in the journal Psychological Science, researchers Shelley Gable and Harry Rice at the University of Rochester examined what they called capitalization in relationships, the way a person responds when their partner shares positive news or personal information. What they found was that responsive, enthusiastic, genuinely engaged follow-up on something a woman had previously shared, a detail she mentioned in an earlier conversation, a worry she let slip, a small piece of herself she offered, was more predictive of emotional connection and relational satisfaction than almost any other behavioral variable they measured. The returning attention is exactly this. It is the act of remembering something small, something she mentioned in passing, something she would not expect you to retain, and returning to it, not as a technique, as proof that you were actually listening. For a mature woman who has been through enough, who has given pieces of herself to men who were already half gone, who has quietly learned to share less because sharing more only confirmed that she was not truly being held in another person's mind, this is not just touching, it is profoundly destabilizing in the best possible way. It bypasses every wall she has built, not because it is clever, but because it is real. Because it communicates something that no number of compliments, no grand gesture, no expensive evening can communicate. I was listening. I was paying attention. You mattered enough to remember. For a woman who has been holding everything together for years, her career, her home, her composure, her own emotional needs on a shelf she has long since stopped checking, this single signal has the power to give her something she has not been able to give herself, permission to put some of it down. Not because she is weak, not because she is finally being swept off her feet by someone impressive, but because for the first time in a long time, she believes she is somewhere safe enough to rest. That is what she has been waiting for, and you now understand how to give it to her without a single word. None of what I have shared with you today requires money. It does not require youth, status, a certain height, or a particular look. What it requires is awareness, presence, and the willingness to show up with genuine intention. The man who does that, the man who walks in with weighted stillness, who listens with his whole body, who pauses before he speaks, who holds a gaze that offers instead of extracts, who respects her space without retreating from it, who remembers the small things. That man is not competing with anyone. He is in a category of his own. He becomes the man she talks about, the man she chooses, deliberately and repeatedly, not because she was swept away, but because she finally, after everything, felt seen. You are building toward that. And there is one more piece that completes what you have started here today. Something about the deeper psychology of what she is actually communicating when she begins to respond to these signals, and what to do in that window so that what is building between you does not dissolve before it becomes something real. That is what comes next, and it would be a genuine shame to stop here, one step before the finish line.